Forget everything you think you know about God, religion, heaven, hell, and everything in between. Forget everything you think you know about history, humanity, and the world we all live in. Whatever you've been taught or told, it's not just wrong. It's actually something much, much worse. You know that old saying that the truth will set you free? It's total bullshit. I genuinely wish I could meet whoever coined that term. I'd love to punch them in the jaw and kick them in their rib cage. But when it comes to the truth, the real, hard truth, that will do a lot to you, but setting you free isn't one of them. I'm sorry. If I sound bitter, angry, and cynical, well, too bad. This is actually me in a good mood, or at least the best mood I can manage at this point. I really can only do so much. I'm an old man, nearing the end of the line. And just last week, I got some very unpleasant news from my doctor. I'd rather not go into details. All you need to know is that my time in this life is short. But before I take my last breath, I need to share this truth. This terrible, soul-crushing truth. But in order to do so, I'll have to recount a time when my soul was still intact, when my faith was still strong. It seems so long ago, but I need to establish that I wasn't always like this. Before I became this broken, bitter shell of a man, I was the son of a respected pastor, the ultimate byproduct of a good, wholesome upbringing in the American Midwest. My childhood was just so idyllic, and my circumstances so perfect. I never wanted for anything, and I always felt loved. So no one was really surprised when I decided to follow my father's footsteps and become a pastor. I went to this prestigious Christian college, but while there, my plans changed somewhat, but not in a bad way. I became an ardent student of the Bible, but not just its words. Its history, its deeper meaning, and its evolution. I was fascinated by it, and I genuinely wanted to learn more. So instead of becoming a full-fledged pastor, I became a modern-day Bible scholar. And I held that title proudly. I still remember how happy my parents were the day I graduated with honors. Even though my mother had fallen ill at the time, they never stopped supporting me or my passions. If only they knew this horrible truth before they passed. Hell, they might actually know now, and in the worst possible way, but no, I'm sorry. I can't think about that right now. Not if I'm to get this message out. But it was me becoming a Bible scholar that ultimately led me to that truth. My unquenchable thirst for both piety and understanding drove me. And for a while, it did a lot of good for me and so many others. For years, I did advanced biblical research for a number of universities and organizations. And I quickly developed a reputation as someone willing to do more than just memorize verses and follow historical accounts of saints. I would actually delve into the how and why behind the theology, building a bigger, bolder picture of God's plan. And I was so good at conveying it that I landed a tenured position at the same school I graduated from. For anyone in my line of work, that was as great a gig as you could hope for. One of the many perks of that job is that the university would actually fund some personal side projects of mine. They usually involved sending me on elaborate trips where I could study rare artifacts and manuscripts. For the most part, those trips were fairly uneventful. I often treated them as mini vacations, seeing parts of the world most Bible scholars could never hope to see. But it was one fateful trip, one misguided side project that ultimately destroyed my soul. It started with this old folktale that I heard during a trip to Africa. There was this legend among certain tribes around Ethiopia, a story about an order of pre-Christian monks. They claimed to possess forbidden biblical manuscripts, some of which dated back all the way to the days of Abraham himself. But every time someone sought this order out, they either never came back or they returned very changed, for lack of a better word. Being a biblical scholar, this did pique my interest. But at first, I didn't give it much credence. There were a lot of secretive groups claiming to have hidden manuscripts from the Bible. The history of lost gospels and discarded Bible stories is quite lengthy. But while most of those were just rumors or frauds, this one felt different. Because that order of monks was very real. Other scholars had the literal scars to prove it. That led me to believe that maybe, just maybe, those manuscripts were genuine. But even if they were, I didn't think I'd ever get a chance to study them. That all changed during a trip to Rome. The university sent me there to study some artifacts at the Vatican. While there was this incident. A number of bishops and monks started having serious mental breakdowns. One day, they were perfectly fine, but the next, they were stark raving mad. One even ended up stripping naked and running down the streets of Rome in the middle of the night. And while being chased by police, he jumped off a bridge and fell to his death. Officially, the Vatican claimed these men had histories of mental illness. And I honestly didn't think much of it until one of the senior bishops sought me out. He literally pulled me out of the library and told me that I needed to check out this manuscript. Apparently, someone from the Vatican actually managed to find that order of monks in Africa. They even managed to get one of the monks and smuggle him to Rome. And even at the time, I suspected this mission used some less than holy tactics. But those details didn't matter to me. I just saw it as an opportunity to study something new. So I followed the bishop, and he took me to this very isolated part of the Vatican, a part that was not open to the public or even most monks or priests. Security there was so tight that they had to blindfold me for parts of it. I admit, this did make me a bit nervous, but I didn't protest. I just thought they were protecting something important, something that meant a lot to the faith. I honestly don't think they understood just how damaging their discovery truly was. And yes, I chose that word for a reason. I promise, it'll make sense soon enough. After going through all the security, I found myself in this special research room, the kind specifically designed to house and protect ancient documents. Now, I'd been in those kinds of rooms before, but not like this. And under this thick layer of protective glass was this large parchment, one that was clearly very old, but surprisingly intact. There was also someone already there when I arrived. This tall, lanky Ethiopian man stood there wearing only this old gray robe. I don't know if he'd been wearing it since he left or if it was something the bishops gave him, but he definitely looked off. He had this blank, distant expression. Not menacing or threatening or anything like that, just blank, as though he was devoid of all hope and passion. The bishop didn't give me his name, and I never asked for it. I was just told that he was a monk from the order, and he was the one who got this manuscript to the Vatican. Now, the way the bishop described that journey, it led me to believe that this man wasn't entirely here by choice. That certainly gave me a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. But again, I didn't ask questions or raise concerns. I just sat down at the table and did what they asked of me. Please, see if you can read this manuscript. It's in Old Hebrew, and I'm told you know Hebrew quite well. We have experts on hand, but when they finish reading it... The bishop's words trailed off before he could finish. Either he was struggling to put into words what happened, or he'd been instructed to keep that a closely guarded secret. Neither would have surprised me, and honestly, I kind of envied that bishop. He didn't have to learn the contents of the manuscript. I did. Even though I didn't end up entirely like the others, I am by no means the lucky one. The monks from the order called this thing the Devil's Gospel. According to them, it was the first and only holy text that was actually inspired and articulated by a higher being. Now granted, many holy texts make that claim. This one was no different, but this one was real. How do I know that? Well, it wasn't just from reading it. That ended up being the easy part. The monk apparently was a scholar like me. And the manuscript was actually a translation of a much older collection of documents, which they claimed dated back 70,000 years. No, that's not exaggeration. That date isn't just some random number either. According to the order, that was how long ago it was when God did battle with the devil. Humanity had been part of that battle. Every angel in heaven and every demon in hell, they'd been part of it too. The order said it consumed the whole world, killing so many that humanity nearly went extinct. But it was the ending of that battle that carried the most weight. This manuscript just happened to cover that part of the story. The monk told me it was essentially an epilogue, the postscript to the larger story that came before it. As for the contents, well, the words are already engraved in my memory. So I'll just relay what they said. The terrible, terrible truth of the devil's gospel, translated for all to hear. And so it came to pass, the devil had triumphed. God and all his angels, and all the humans that hath worshipped and loved him, fell on the battlefield. Where countless tribes of men once stood united by God's side, armed with the love, wisdom, and spirit of the Almighty, only vast fields of corpses remained. There were few survivors of the various tribes, all now scattered, broken, and distraught. No longer warmed with the light of God's love, the devil allowed them to flee. And upon the field of battle, God lay wounded and dying, his holy light fading fast. Armed with his flaming sword, the devil stood over him, prepared to strike the final blow. But with his remaining breath, God sought one final act of mercy.
Please, Lord of Darkness, Champion of Evil, spare what remains of my children from your wrath. Take your victory, take this world, take my kingdom, but spare the souls of my cherished creations.
But the devil had no mercy. Unbound by pity or compassion, he laughed in the face of the Almighty. And before he struck the killing blow, he exacted on God one final wrath.
Almighty God, bearer of boundless love and joy, you insult me. And for that, your precious creations shall suffer even more. But take heed, for I shall not simply draw them into my dominion of fire. For them, I will inflict a fate far, far worse. Upon your death, I shall leave this world, along with my many demons. But I will continue watching over what remains. In time, man will repopulate this shattered world. They and their children will live on for many generations. But in that time, they will forget the lives of peace, love, and joy they had under your dominion. They will forget that they are one tribe united by your divine light. And henceforth, they will become divided. And once divided, they will fight one another, suffering poverty, famine, pain, and death. They'll pray to you, Almighty God, seeking any possible reprieve. But only I shall hear their prayers, and I will look down upon them with the utmost glee, and offer only pitiless silence. In the wake of that silence, they'll conjure new gods and new faiths, seeking endlessly to fill the void left by your failure. But they will not succeed. They'll keep praying and praying, suffering and suffering, hurting and hating one another at every turn. Many may even doubt your very existence. But ultimately, they and those praying to false gods will perish. And when they do, they will fall into my domain. They will either suffer in flame or suffer complete oblivion. Their fate and the continued fate of every generation will be mine to decide. All because man placed his faith in you, and you failed them.
And with those words of unholy cruelty, the devil struck God down. With his death, the angels cried out in agony, their light snuffed out and their spirits vanquished. And the kingdom of heaven henceforth was abandoned, doomed to fade into dust. All that remained was earth and the underworld, for it now belonged to the Lord of darkness, and God's beloved children and the children of their children were doomed to suffer his dominion for eternity. The gospel of the devil. I know, it's pretty damn bleak. Quite possibly the worst way to end a holy book. You can't expect to attract many adherents with theology like that, which explains why the order of monks was so small. But initially, I didn't believe it at all. If anything, I was just confused. This read like the complete antithesis of every scriptural narrative I'd ever read. Yes, God and the devil clash constantly in the Abrahamic traditions and in many other religious traditions. But a story about the devil winning out and God being slain, that was just obscene. At the same time, though, this gnawing dread came over me. Because in the grand scheme of things, this kind of story made sense. I mean, just think about it. The world is full of all these different people all worshiping different gods and following different religious traditions. And even within those traditions, there are these denominations and sects. Christianity alone has many. They all believe they're right, but therein lies the problem. They all can't be right, but they all can be wrong. And all the conflict and hate that emerges as a result, according to the story, it's a direct result of mankind praying to a God that isn't there, a God that was slain, replaced by a Lord of darkness that laughs as he answers every prayer with utter silence. In that world, there would be no need for the devil to corrupt any souls. He wouldn't need to do anything other than watch mankind live and suffer in this flawed, godless world. The fate of our souls decided only by him. It was truly a horrific thought, one I refused to believe. There's just no way this could be true. I said as such to the monk with me, who had yet to show a hint of emotion. I remember yelling and cursing at him for crafting such a horrendous lie. And keep in mind, I rarely cursed at this point in my life. But then, the monk leaned in closer. And in that moment, I saw this fire in his eyes, as though the gates of hell itself had opened. He then whispered into my ear, in this voice that was neither human nor divine. And what he said ultimately destroyed my soul.
It's all true.
That was not simply a man stating an opinion. It was a message, one straight from the pits of hell itself. When he said those words, I swear, I saw a brief flash of the devil's domain. I saw him sitting on his throne, grinning and laughing as he refused to answer any prayers, randomly deciding which souls suffered and which faced oblivion. Across this vast hellscape, I saw only suffering. Good, decent souls suffering alongside the wicked and sinful. No standards of judgment, no rhyme or reason to it all. It was just all so pointless, and guided only by the whims of the Dark Lord. Upon seeing this, the weight of the truth hit me. The devil's gospel. It was all real. My faith, and that of everyone who had ever lived on this planet. It was all a lie. A self-deluded lie. At that moment, my mind broke along with my heart and my spirit. I remember lashing out, trying to destroy the manuscript with my bare hands. The Vatican guard stopped me. I remember cursing them out, urging them to destroy this cursed document. I still don't know if they did. For all they know, they just threw it in some vault, not knowing the sheer horror it revealed. Whatever happened to it, I was eventually expelled from Vatican City. I also spent a few days in a psychiatric hospital in Rome. But even when I tried to articulate what I saw and what I read, I just couldn't put it into words. Like all the others, I was deemed mentally ill. That just made it worse, because it meant, in this damned world, he who holds the greatest truth is deemed mad. And once that sunk in, my life just fell apart. I quit my job at the university, started drinking and doing drugs, seeking whatever reprieve I could find from the dread I now knew. For a time, I tried to share this terrible truth, but I was either written off as a bitter ex-Christian or a madman. And now, with my doctor telling me that my time is limited on this planet, this might be my last chance. I don't know how much or how little difference it'll make. I just know that I've read the devil's gospel. I know the terrible truth that lies at the heart of this fallen world. My only hope, the last prayer that I dare utter with my shattered soul, is that when I die, I face only oblivion, and not the wrath of the devil who wrote that gospel.